and we're told about money as well.
Yeah.
And what is the reason? Because money can do good as well.
Yeah.
You think of the amount of poverty that could be solved with wealth.
Huge.
And to be honest, that's the vast majority of Christians would like to see poverty gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, money is the big key to that.
Bibles aren't going to print themselves.
Yep.
Missionaries aren't going to go for free. The gospel has to be shared. You know, how will they know if they're not told? How will they be told if a preacher's not sent? Like the whole reason, for me, the whole reason behind finance being important is because it's an evangelistic tool. And I think that's also why there's that spiritual element. There is a battle because it comes down to souls. It was never designed to be self-centered. It was never designed to be so you can have 5 Rolexes and a private airstrip in your back garden and stuff, and all these sorts of things. You know, we laugh about, and there is a purpose for that for some people, right? You know, because they have evangelistic missions that mean they're all around the world, and that is phenomenal. The difficulty, I think, has come about where people go, well, that becomes the standard, and the understanding of abundance has to be flexible and adapted to the context.
Yeah.
You know, abundance in Manila is very different from abundance in Miami.
Yeah.
So we can't have a one-size-fits-all model. And I think that because of how polarized the world has become, there has been this tendency to swing to one thing or the other. And there's this kind of asceticism that sets in.
I think social media robs people of the understanding of context.
So true.
One thing that we notice, obviously, like, for example, we've just been in the Philippines. We were in the Philippines in February, and some of the areas have been really, really affected by suicide rates going up in teenagers. And big influence of that is social media.
Interesting.
Because all of a sudden, all these kids that are living in rural areas have now got phones, so they can see how the rest of the world is looking. And all of a sudden, their resilience has been depleted because they're now comparing their existence to somebody else's. And I think that same thing applies when it comes down to wealth. I've got friends who live on the dump site in Manila, and their standard of wealth would be completely different to someone in London's standard of wealth. Absolutely. And so we actually had this conversation on what would be considered prosperity or blessing. We actually had this conversation, and we have to understand that wealth is not I'm thinking retrospective. No, it's not retrospective. It's wealth is what's the word I'm thinking of? Word's gone. Anyway, the wealth is basically, it's different for everybody. Like where you are, the context of where you are, wealth is defined differently in that environment to if someone was living in London or Portsmouth or America or wherever. And so I think it's really interesting hearing you say that, because I've just literally come from those types of conversations, and I think social media doesn't help with that.
No. Well, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Right. And so people do compare themselves. And the thing about money is, because it is a spirit, it knows exactly which buttons to press for each individual. And so for somebody who's got a vast amount of money, the spirit of mammon and greed will say it's not enough. For somebody who is desperately poor, it will tell them there isn't enough. And the truth of the matter is there is plenty for everybody. But what's the purpose behind it? What's the vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like the parable of the talents.
Yeah, Matthew 25.
Jesus isn't expecting the one with 1 to create that 5.
That's right.
So there is that. There's also about the different clay jars, and sort of people are made for different purposes and reasons. But we as people don't like that. No, we all like everything to be on the same playing field and everything else. And I deserve this and I deserve that because that person's got that and the other.
I think one of the most powerful images I saw was, it's basically saying, you know, it had these 3 kids trying to look over a wall, and one kid was really short, one kid was a little bit taller, one kid was really tall.
Yeah.
And so, but they all got given 1 box each. The small kid still couldn't see over the wall. Yeah. The guy who was a little bit taller could see over the wall, but just about. And the guy over here was like head and shoulders above the wall.
Didn't even need the box.
It didn't need the box. You know, he didn't need it. So, and it basically redefined for me that kind of mentality was, if we give the same thing to everybody, that doesn't mean you get to get the same outcome from everybody.
Yeah.
And so it's about talents, it's about being faithful, it's about being a good steward, it's
Yeah.
about being wise, it's about being all those things.
Well, I say this to my kids. I say to my son and my daughter, I love you the same, but I treat you differently. I shouldn't and couldn't treat my son the same way I treat my daughter. It wouldn't work. But it doesn't mean I love them differently. They, and I think that a lot of people do that. I think that people do fundamentally forget that as a Christian, we are in a kingdom. And because we're in a kingdom, we have a king. It's not a democracy. It's not communism. We aren't all the same. Your mission is completely different from mine. And there might be overlap, absolutely. And the biggest overlap is Jesus is Lord. And we submit to that. Yeah. But I think there is something about humanity that likes to peer over the fence and see what someone else has. And it's not done from what can I add to your side. I remember my daughter and I are foodies. And I remember at a very young age hearing this guy talking about kids and comparison of food and looking over to see how many chips his brother had versus, and I had to say to her, listen, we only ever look in someone else's bowl to see what we can add to it, not to see whether they've got something different. Yeah. And I didn't come up with it. I heard that and I thought, I have to learn that. I have to teach that to my children, that if you're looking in somebody else's bowl, it's to see what you can add, not what they've got that you haven't.
Yeah.
And it's really good. It's also remembering that we're all part of the body. And we have different parts to it.
Yeah.
And if you're a hand and you're a hand and you're trying to do a foot's job,
get good with being a hand.
Yeah. Being a hand.
But there is another thing about this. I remember talking, and this is off topic of finances, but I remember talking with somebody. They had a slight gripe about a traveling preacher, and they said, but they just preach the same word. And I said, yes, but you have to remember we're part of the body. Part of the body is blood. Some people's blood is, some part of the church of Jesus is that you're the blood. And that means that you go around the body taking the same thing or removing certain things,
Yes.
And so if that person, that's the grace on their life, or that's the word on their heart, or maybe they've got 5 things that they cycle through. That's not something to criticize. That's them. They need to lean into the Holy Spirit to know what to take to when and where. But having the same message isn't an issue. Like it's their life mission, and being the blood. People forget that being part of the body is, there's blood in that as well. And that's
you wouldn't criticize a businessman for having the same business for 20 years.
Great. Exactly right. Exactly right. But we all want the Rhema word. We want the traveling, we want to be served dessert. That's from the guest speaker.
So kind of bringing it into finance. So you've written a course, and that's specifically looking at biblical finance and the links there and how to sort of put that into place. Tell us a little bit about, how did that journey start?
Yeah. I mean, that.
So you said about like people coming to you and asking questions.
Yeah.
That kind of the start of the snowball.
That was a part of it.
Okay.
Then I had co-written this course, and it was 4 weeks, and it was very practical, talking about how to set goals and how to have a budget, how to save, how to pay down debt. And then the final part was how to leave a legacy. And we ran that course 2 or 3 times before people then said to us, please, can you include tithing? So it was literally that I got a message from the guy about 20 minutes before, and I just quickly, back of an envelope, did this thing and did 20 minutes on tithing, because it is one of my favorite subjects. Just, people have a thing. You said business, people have the same business. The core of all of this is tithing for me. But what I found myself thinking is, okay, fine, we've given these people these practical tools, but imagine that you were just given a JCB digger. How do you know why you have it, what it's for, what the purpose of the JCB, all of these sorts of things. So we give these people these tools, but I wanted to go one step back from that. And so I expanded that course a little bit, but really it was about saying, okay, well, if following on from my terrible metaphor with the JCB, but if we're helping people build a financial house,
right,
where do you start? You start in the foundation.
Yeah.
Then you build the ground floor. Then you build the first floor. And the first floor really is the fancy bathroom. It's the ensuite. It's all the stuff that allows you to live well, but you have, and sleep, live and sleep and raise a family and leave a legacy, build that legacy. But fundamentally, if you haven't done the groundwork in the foundation, if you start building on that first floor, it will come crashing down. Especially as we're talking about this, right at the start of this, we're talking about the spiritual connotations of this and the spirit of mammon. And so there are lots and lots of Christians who I've met who love Jesus, who are plugged into church, who earn good money, and unknowingly are influenced by the spirit of mammon. And so I started going back and going, okay, well, what is biblical stewardship? What does that look like? What's the model for it? Where are the scriptures that underpin that? And I just started doing study for myself, first and foremost. And then I just kind of started writing everything down. And it just, I calculated that it was 200 hours of study that I had done, that I kind of, and 10 years of kind of living it and thinking about it. And it ended up becoming 12 and a half hours of teaching, 22 modules. It just got out of hand. Like, it was meant to be a 6-part course, and it just got out of hand because it's the foundational stuff. So on the course, we talk about stewardship. We talk about healthy relationships. People don't realize that they have a relationship with money. Just like, alcoholics, one of the first things they learn is they have a relationship with alcohol. And we have relationships with all sorts of stuff that we don't recognize. Talking about sowing and reaping, and Mark chapter 4. And Jesus, when he's explaining this to his disciples in Mark 4, he says, this is the most pivotal parable that I'm going to talk about. If you don't understand this, you won't get any of the rest of it. And it is spiritual, but it's also natural, right? You look at Genesis 8:22, you look at Galatians 6:7-9. These things are physical and they're spiritual.
That's good.
Yes, I love it. I was going to say, because money is an accelerator, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you give lots of money to someone who's got a corrupt heart, that money is going to accelerate the corruptness of their heart. When you give money to someone with a good heart, with a generous heart or a generous spirit, it accelerates that. So I think it's interesting coming from that kind of perspective, because I knowing that money is an accelerant, it's interesting to see how people can become or journey with money in a healthy way without it accelerating parts of their character that shouldn't be accelerated.
Yeah, hugely. And it's you're absolutely right. So the 3 courses is the foundation, the ground from the first 4. The foundation is all about the heart. Then we look at the head. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Then we do the hands, the practical stuff. If you're